Hey there, I'm Lee Rowley, and this is Lee After Dark. Why? Because there's more to being a business leader than just business. Each week, one brave entrepreneur ejects the elevator pitch and tells us about, well, whatever they want to talk about. Today, I have with me my good friend, Gary Monti. Gary, how are you?
I tell you, if I was any better, Lee, I'd have to be two people.
Ooh, yeah, and then we'd have to, well, you could fit two people in the camera. That could be done. We're gonna have to work on that. All
Yeah,
right.
I'm doing
So,
pretty good.
yeah, great. So, Gary, the rules are simple. For the next 20 minutes, we can discuss anything you want except your business. If you're successful, you'll have 5 minutes afterward to pitch your full head off.
All right.
And each time you slip up and talk about your business during the interview, you lose 1 minute of pitch time at the end. So it's kind of like,
Oh, I like it.
right? Yeah. So there's a little game show element here thing, Willie or won't he? You ready?
Sure am.
Very cool. Let me go ahead and start the timer. And what are we getting into for the next 20 minutes?
Oh, I don't know. Growth through suffering. How's that sound?
Growth through, wow. We're coming right out with the heavy stuff. All right.
That's right. Well, I practice secular Buddhism. I think you and I have talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
I do not practice Buddhism as a religion. I want to be very clear about that. I just want to find a certain part of my anatomy with both hands, and maybe someone will lend me the occasional flashlight to help.
Yeah. Okay. So then, it was an entry point then to this growth through suffering concept that we're going to be talking about. For those that are unfamiliar with secular Buddhism, can you kind of lay a little groundwork?
Sure. The purpose of Buddhism is just to stop suffering. That's all it's about. And suffering is based on attachment. And attachment is reflected in expectations. So what can happen is I can either lust after someone or something, I can have a rage towards someone or something, or I can be indifferent. And all three of those situations are reactive modes. And what happens is when I become reactive, I am controlled by the thing about which I'm reacting.
Right.
So that if I'm afraid of my boss, if I'm an employee, then what happens is I judge my whole life through the workday as to where am I with respect to that boss. So what happens is as they go, so go I. Or let's make it more intimate. Let's say I'm lacking honesty with my spouse or significant other. Then what happens is that lie that I'm holding, I end up becoming that lie because I gauge everything based on my fear of letting the cat out of the bag. So I lose my character and I just become a reactive mess, always focusing on whether or not I'm going to get found out or whether or not I'm going to get caught.
Okay.
And it applies to lust. If I just had that brand new car, so you see where this goes. And what happens is I disappear and I just become a reflection of that car. And for me, this is a daily challenge. Someone comes in every night when I'm sleeping and sweeps my brain out from all the goodness I've developed the day before. And each morning I start over. And so that's what secular Buddhism is about in a nutshell.
Okay. So then if we say the purpose, and I use that word because that's not really right, but it's something that people can relate to of secular Buddhism is ending suffering, then how does the growth through suffering fit into that? So we're trying to end it, but we need it to grow, right?
Oh, by confronting. Yes.
Okay.
I did a podcast this morning with two of my associates, and I was asked, what the hell are you talking about? And I said, this is really simple. What you do is you get a sheet of paper out and you do a Ben Franklin. You put a line down the middle and then go from Sunday to Saturday and write down everything that pisses you off, everything you lust after, everything you want to ignore, and the people associated with those activities. So like if you're into road rage, write that down. And what you do is you just keep on making that list of people and reactivity, things and reactivity. And then at the end of the seventh day, remember, this is a Ben Franklin, so you do all that on the left side. On the right side, you write down, what did I just say about myself? And that's how we discover where we're BSing ourselves, where we're in denial about who we are. So to end suffering, we first have to get in touch with it. And one of the best ways to get in touch with it is to list all the people, places, and things we react to, because the way to end suffering is to stop reacting. So by, if let's say I don't like the way my ex-mother-in-law breathes. Okay.
Fair enough.
You can hear the inherent bias associated with that.
Yeah, no, it's totally objective.
And my goal is to understand, why is it important for me to react so intensely just over the way she breathes? And what that will do is that will get me in touch with the part of myself that I'm pretending is okay, and actually it's not. And it's just trying to ramrod the world to get everything to go its way. And so when I discover that, then what I need to do is figure out, why is it important for me to react that way?
Mm-hmm.
And then what healthy behavior do I replace that with?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's important that you brought both of those up, because I think that where a lot of people focusing on is what I call following the neural breadcrumbs. In terms of taking the, when you stop and think about a situation and you go, well, why do I do that? And eventually you go down the rabbit hole far enough and you figure out what's at the root of that. And then that's where everybody goes, great, now what do I do about it?
Right. And that's where we discover the part of ourselves that got damaged or dented as we walk through life. And we need to decide how we're going to rehabilitate that part of ourselves, or if there's a scar left from some spiritual cut that was felt, we need to decide how we can use that scar to walk through life. For example, we each are wounded in unique ways. If we choose to address that, then what happens is we can mentor other people. We can empathize. We can be compassionate with people that suffer similarly. And what that does is that opens up the opportunity for connection. So the scar doesn't go away, but what happens is, by embracing the scar, the unique thing about when we're wounded is it alters our vision in a way that we can see things that other people can't. And what that does is we can then bring value to community. And what happens is we kind of turn that suffering inside out, and we drop it and we say, oh, I know what it's like when you suffer that way. And then we say things like, hey, do you ever feel ABC 1, 2, 3? And then that person goes, oh my God, I thought I was in total isolation with my suffering. And here you're telling me you used to suffer from that. And then they can say, how'd you get out of it? And then what we can do is we can stay connected and talk about that path of reclaiming ourselves. And also that includes accepting sometimes the unfairness of life never gets resolved. A child dies. Okay. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do with that? So anyway, in a nutshell, that next step. So you discover your suffering. Now the goal is to flip that wound that's felt, to not try to make it perfect. Stop regretting that you were ever cut. Mm-hmm. The fact is, in my healing process, how can I connect with other people and actually make the world a bit better, because I know what it's like to suffer that way.
Sure. That connection, I think, also facilitates healing for you, because, I don't want to say, like, the idea that you have to make yourself okay again in a silo, in a, whatever, ivory tower, whatever, in solitude, and then go help other people. That's not how that works. Correct. Right? Because you and I and everyone else walking the planet will never finish the job of eliminating our own suffering.
Right.
Right. It's just not possible, but we still have to strive toward that, because better is still, better.
Right. And what that does is very astute. It needs to be done in connection. It needs to be done in community. And not that, if a woman's been raped, and it's a horrendous experience, it's not that she goes on a cable network and start talking about it. Yes, there's a need for some privacy, but at some point it will be important, as that individual comes along, to be supportive of other women or men that have suffered such a horrific experience. that there's a, to experience joy, there's a need to come back into community at some point. And so the best way to come back into community is to share the wisdom that's gained by recovering from the trauma that's been experienced. This is not for the faint of heart.
I can definitely relate to that. Excuse me. In fact, for me, I'm gonna go to a coughing fit here. After losing my daughter,
That's
really,
right.
that's it was, but it really did. The healing really didn't start happening until I started connecting with people and helping them with their suffering. And it's like it began as I don't know what to offer you because I'm still flailing myself, but I'm here,
Yes.
and you're not alone.
Yes.
And that grew into, eventually what do you, and I feel that I still feel that Arya, my daughter, influences everything I do now.
Yes.
But it took a lot. I mean, we're almost at the 7-year mark.
Oh my.
Since she passed. Yeah. And sometimes it feels like yesterday and sometimes it feels like a million years ago. But it's still an ongoing process, and I'm still learning as I go, and I have new and different things to offer people who are going through the same struggle that I didn't have a year in or 6 months in when I was still at the bottom of Jim Beam bottle.
Yes, you remind me, I think I may have mentioned in previous conversations, I have 2 podcasts, and one of them is called Thrive and Connect, and it's about addressing the unfairness of life and working to get to a place where the life can be enjoyed. And part of that is I have a 13-part series on suicide, and people that have either attempted and failed to complete it or survivors that were left behind. And they figure out a way to get to a spot where they can keep their connection with the loved one that's passed, but they don't dwell on it anymore. And actually, they can't explain it, but they all said the same thing. They find a way to move that energy into life and to be constructive so that they don't block off the lost loved one. They're actually still integrating them into the way that they're moving forward. And interestingly enough, because I don't know who's listening to this, almost all of them kept a talisman of the individual that they lost. And I know one, an ex-police officer, his son had killed himself with his service revolver.
Oh, wow.
And he kept a talisman of his son in his pocket. And interestingly enough, when he gets stressed or he's upset, he reaches in his pocket and he just feels that talisman and he starts calming down. And it's all because you mentioned the flow, the continuity of your daughter still being present. And that's what they all said. And my words are starting to fail because it's really hard to put this into words unless it's been experienced. So I think I'll stop. But for the listener, hope really comes from moving in to the suffering and then looking for the pain that underpins the suffering, and then start resolving that pain, and then the suffering will disappear. And what am I talking about? The pain is, let's say someone stabs me. Okay, there's the pain associated with getting stabbed. And oh, by the way, they had the knife, I got the wound, I have to figure out how to heal. Boy, talk about the unfairness of life. The suffering is, why did that person stab me? Why did I go out that night? If I would have stayed home, see, that's all self-inflicted suffering. So the key is to get back to the wound. Oh, I was stabbed. I need to figure out how to heal. And then I'm going to go into life and share what I can based on that experience. My life has been altered, but I'm going to work to make it a constructive alteration.
That's exactly right, and beautifully said.
I
think that I think that guilt and blame are sides of the same coin, and I'm constantly saying, like, look, they're a proxy for doing something.
Oh, I love it.
And I know certain people that I'm married to that don't necessarily appreciate that. But occasionally it slips out and, I catch what for and we just go on. But yeah, it really is. It does nothing. And that's not me. I think that was Jordan Peterson. though I'm not, I don't claim to have just dreamed that one up. But it really is, and that's what we do when we can't have what we want, is we blame ourselves or we blame others, and we feel guilt because to us it feels like we're doing something about it. And it's like, well, wait a minute, what are we paying penance here? Is this like some 13th century form of punishing oneself here, or what?
Get the cat of nine tails.
Yeah. Sheesh. And letting go of that, letting go of the need to blame yourself or others is a huge part of healing.
Yes.
And an ongoing process.
Yes.
So, and here's one thing I do want to touch on is that a lot of people believe that the goal of secular Buddhism or Buddhism in general is to eliminate desire, eliminating suffering by eliminating desire.
Right.
Right. And I hear that over and over again. And so then I have to go all Alan Watts on them and go, well, okay, how do you not desire? If you desire not to desire, that's desiring. So you're
that's okay. That's a classic Buddhist question.
Right. And I heard it from one of his recordings and knew that it wasn't anywhere remotely new. But what is that? Because I think that a lot of us, especially I see in metaphysical circles, that people get caught up in this is like, I have to let go of desire. I have to not want for anything. And I don't know that that's possible in the constructs of our human brains.
Well, it's one thing to desire. It's another thing to lust.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
cling.
And when lust occurs, we are turning our being over to whatever it is we're lusting after.
Okay.
The girl that got away, or the guy that got away. And I actually experienced this. I thought there was a woman, I was convinced we were going to get married. And what I noticed was she was much more relaxed when I called her from Washington, D.C., when I was out doing business. In fact, what happened was one day I was pulling into her driveway and I saw her and she was actually very relaxed. And then when she got sight of, she didn't know I saw that. And then when I walked in the house, she just stiffened up. And I had to break the relationship off. It was one of the most painful things I did. Because what I realized was I looked at how I was attaching to her instead of genuinely loving her. And I believe I was just smothering her. I was smothering the relationship. I mean, I'll just talk about my 50%. She can talk about her 50%. Very nice person. I mean, to this day, if I saw her, I'd shake her hand, hug her, or whatever. But the point is, I lusted after her instead of working on a loving relationship. And I realized I needed to break it off. And oh my God, I walked into a personal hell for months, but I needed to address that. And I was just reading Carl Jung, and he talks about people have the urge to avoid these kind of experiences like the plague. And it's almost easier to walk into death than it is to confront our deepest fears, our deepest hatreds, our deepest lusts, and our deepest indifferences. And I swear to God, Jung must have been in my head when he wrote that. He wrote that like in 1915. So, but so what happens is, like, I like cigars and I like scotch. As long as I just enjoy them as they flow into my life and flow out of my life, I'm fine. When they become the end of my life, then I'm in trouble, because now I'm moving into addiction. I have to have those cigars, or I have to have that scotch, or whatever. Just like I had to have that woman. That's the difference. There's a difference between natural desire and then having that desire go to the extreme where it turns into a lust.
Sure.
And we get lost in that lust.
I agree with that. To me, it relates back to the principle of Wu Wei, non-force. If you want life, don't cling to it. Don't force it.
Right.
And that's a lesson that I'm like having to learn over and over again. And every time I come back to this left and I go, damn it, this looks just, I know now I know enough to know that I've already screwed this up and I'm back here again. Yeah. So, but again, for me, letting go into the attachment of this ideal that I'll ever be, whatever it is, I don't know. We have this idea, I think, that we're in a dress rehearsal and that like life's going to begin once we figure this out, or once we get this car, or once we get this job, or once we, get this divorce, or raise these kids or whatever. And it never frigging gets there.
Right.
And it's okay.
Right.
I think. I don't
And
know.
that's the other thing. It's about letting go of suffering in the presence of the unfairness of life. And that's the
Yes.
challenge as an adult.
Yes.
Uh, I had a gentleman, I'll never forget this. This is another one. He was from Italy and he owned a software company and he was in Boston. And I spent my last penny on getting a round trip flight to Boston in the hotel so that I could meet with him. And about 12 hours before the meeting was to occur, his wife dropped dead back in Italy and he got on the next plane. And I paid, I mean, that was it. I was out of gas and I went into a financial pit because he and we were going to work together and I did not have the reserves to continue the relationship. And oh my God, the unfairness of life just smacked me right in the middle of the forehead. And then you heard my deep sigh, so I guess I hung up over it. And I just inventoried, what do I have? What can I do with what I've got? And it was a painful journey, but I stayed focused on what can I do with what I've got. And I ended up, I got back on my feet again, and I got my consulting practice to go in the direction I wanted it to go.
Right. Tackling those hard questions brought you clarity, and which brought action. Ruminating brings you more misery, which it goes in the other direction. So absolutely, and it's tip of the hat for figuring that out and getting it done, because I mean some people just never come back up, and that's a horrible shame. So you know what, we probably could film enough for like 4 or 5 episodes, but we've actually succeeded in our 20-minute Lee After Dark non-business discussion challenge. So so I tell you what, I'm a man of my word. So 5 minutes, you can talk about what you do, where people can contact you. You can go on with this discussion. The floor is yours, man.
Okay. Well, my business is Center for Managing Change. Okay. And what I do is I take everything we just talked about and I bring it to the business world. Suffering in business is a symbol of not fully owning oneself. Now, there is an exclusion for that. Like when the recession hit, we don't have control over recessions happening. But outside of those tsunamis that are beyond our control, when I hear things like, I just can't find good people, my customers need to pay more, why do my vendors charge me so much? And people go on and on with those kind of things. Really, they're talking about themselves and their inability to be honest with themselves and be fully present in the reality that they're experiencing. So at Center for Managing Change, what I do is I run psychological assessments on the people I work with. Then I look at their numbers. I look at their business plan. Where do they want to get to? Then I look at their current methodologies. And then we start mud wrestling, because I don't know how else.
I like that analogy. Cool.
Because the political resistance. That's why I do the assessments, because, oh, yes, I want to make more money. Okay, do you want to do the changes that it takes for your business to grow? Well, no, I want to stay exactly as I am, but I'd like to grow. And that's when the mud wrestling begins. And so what I do is I use external measurables like loss of a client or not being able to expand. And I use that externality to push on them to take their own personal journey inside, because until they rearrange that furniture and do something different, the outside is not going to change at all. So that's how I work. I help people come out of denial, understand themselves better, participate in abundance rather than greed, and grow their business accordingly. In fact, my tagline is get focused, get on track, get back to profitable growth.
Awesome. So you're kind of achieving growth from the inside out then, really.
Yes.
In a way, in a world where we're constantly looking for the easy buttons and we're kind of duct taping our our magic solutions together, and then we don't realize what we've created, because it sounds like you're going back to that core, that foundation, which is really you and what's going on inside you.
Yes, because other than that, if it's an outside only activity, then it's just accumulation. Mm-hmm. There is no abundance. It's just accumulation. I had one client I worked with. He went from 40 million in self-worth and personal worth to 60 million in personal worth, and he was just as miserable.
Right, miserable on a much higher level.
Right. And then he would try to push me off by showing, like my bank book has more zeros than your bank book. And I said, and which one of us is roaming the street? He liked to walk a lot. And which one of us is like the Flying Dutchman and just roaming endlessly with an empty soul, trying to figure out what to do because life is aimless right now. He was shocked when I said, like, nobody was supposed to know that. Well, getting back to they had the knife, I got the wound for the listener. If you work through your personal sufferings and you claim yourself, your ability to see things and be spot on when someone tries to BS you, oh man, your bullshit radar, I mean, it's just going to be phenomenal.
Absolutely.
So that's what, so I have a constant love-hate relationship with my clients. It's just...
Totally understand that. And so we'll have all the links if you want to send some to your the
Center for
podcast series.
Change. Yeah, they can Google that.
Yeah. So we'll put in the links in the show notes as well so that people can get to you easily. Any last words?
Yes. I'd like for the listener to take 1 minute and just pause and breathe and just look at where they are and think about, let go of reacting and just quietly think about the next thing they want to do in a deliberate way. That's my wish, my hope for the listener.
And there's going to be at least one person who's going to hear this today and go, oh, wow, you know what? This is exactly what I needed to hear. It's happened to me, and I'm sure that it's happened to you. So thank you so much, Gary, for coming on. It's always a blast talking to you, and we get into some pretty cerebral discussions, but it always shakes out well. So we are out of time. If you found Lee After Dark more entertaining and relevant than most of the track out there, give our hosts over at IPMNation.com some love, or subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, iTunes, and wherever the heck else this show ends up. This is Lee Rowley with my good friend Gary Monti. Until next time, be present and be well.